5 tech companies in 2021 spent 27 million euros to lobby against legislation that would provide an even playing field online. I'll give you this intro break to guess who they were. Welcome back to Technality. I'm Jacqueline Swan, and the answer to that question probably won't surprise you. The companies were Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, and Apple. The usual suspects. But what exactly were they spending 27 million euros to fight? In 2020, the EU announced that they'd be looking to even the online playing field, with a part of the plan to hold tech giants more accountable.
Tech giants will have to change the way they do business in Europe or face fines of up to 10% of worldwide turnover.
Because with great power comes great responsibility. Or it should at least. This, of course, didn't sit well with the companies, especially since the last time the European Union created internet legislation was in the year 2000. So for 22 years, these tech giants have been creating their own rules, which have allowed them to dominate the space and become the gatekeepers. They're not very happy that their hold on the market is being challenged. But let's take a closer look at what they're rallying against. It's called the DSA, and the goal is to provide internet users with better protections while giving tech giants obligations they need to follow. Some of the proposed laws would include banning targeted ads used towards children. Algorithms and how they recommend content need to be transparent. Users need the ability to opt out of recommendations based on profiling. Sites need clear and accessible terms and conditions. There will be set rules for how they deal with crisis situations, and many more. If companies do fail to follow these rules, they could receive a fine that's equal to 6% of their global revenue. And repeat offenders could potentially get banned from operating in the European Union. This is essentially the TLDR of what we know about the DSA at the moment, but they are all sweeping changes. They're also changes that I feel like we should have instituted a long time ago, but better late than never. Of course, while the individual user and smaller companies might be happy to see some accountability and a more open, fair playing field, tech giants aren't exactly thrilled with these proposed changes, which is why in 2021, those 5 big companies, alongside other major players, upped their lobbying budgets and tactics. And all this was all revealed in Freedom of Information Acts obtained by civil groups Corporate Europe Observatory and Global Witness. From off-the-record dinners to pitting EU institutions against each other, these companies did a lot to push back against these changes. Changes that fundamentally are meant to bolster the individual's rights online. For example, Google was lobbying to be allowed to use targeted ads against children. When they didn't make much headway there, they started to tweak the phrasing and rules, like changing the obligation to only known children. So tech giants hate it, which is usually a good sign for everyday people. How is this really going to affect you? Well, for those outside of the European Union, this just might result in a blanket update to how these companies operate, because it's easier to apply and monitor these changes globally than it is to have a different set of standards for the rest of the world. This may also act as foundation for other countries who are looking to put their own regulations in place to curb monopolies. For those in the European Union, you should expect a more even playing field. From being able to contest the removal of posts to being able to see how the algorithms of the site operate, the Act theoretically protects users' offline rights online. There's also the issue of how this might be abused by governments in the future. Like the crisis response mechanism, which was introduced last minute, would allow the European Commission to declare a state of emergency and require platforms to take mitigating action. The Commission could potentially have sweeping powers to suppress speech. And again, because the final text of the legislation hasn't been published yet, we don't really know how problematic this part might be. I like to think that this is a step in the right direction to create a more even playing field online, but I'm not holding my breath that this is going to return us to an age before these power players. Now, as I've said, the final text of the DSA has yet to be seen. There are still details that need to be tweaked, and a lot of this happens behind closed doors, which is an issue civil groups have pointed out in the past because they can't have a say in what that final legislation looks like, which is why civil advocates aren't exactly jumping for joy at the DSA. They have to rely on what they hear through the grapevine to know how these negotiations are going. Well, corporations with millions of dollars to burn can find their way into the room somehow. So we will have to wait until the finalized version is brought before the European Parliament and Council before we should know how to feel about the DSA. And regardless of how we feel, there is a likely chance that it will pass. But if this is really the new constitution for the internet, Legislators really need to get this one right, because it could set the precedent for other countries and how tech companies operate globally. Those are my thoughts, and this was a very TLDR version of the DSA and what's been happening around it. Do you think this is a step towards a fair and open internet? Do you think the European Commission will enforce these policies when they come into effect? Or do you think that this version of the internet is too far gone for the individual user and we need to move to Web 3? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you want more content about where your future is going, subscribe to Technality.